Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I are ready for a sort of a new series that we're going to do, and sort of a continuation of the top 10s that we've been doing here for the last little while, as we've, it was like we did it through the summer, and then we did them occasionally through the season, and then now there's nothing else to do but nice, fun lists. So we are moving from the top players from every NHL team. You can go back and listen to all those. Please subscribe to the show, and you can go back and you can find all the episodes for every single one of the teams in the National Hockey League, all 31. Now we are going to start a new little category, and it is players from particular countries, or so today we're going to start off with the Czech Republic. We're starting off relatively small, I would say, in comparison to some other countries. But yeah, we decided Czech Republic, the 1998 gold medal winners in the Nagano Olympics. And that's pretty much their one thing that they've really taken home in the last 30 years, but that's where we decided to start. Justin, I wanted to get your thoughts on how you came up with this list, because obviously there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's international play, there's their play in the NHL, and this isn't like, hey, here's the best players that have ever played for them in the Olympics. It's just the best players to come from their country, but it could also include their international play. It's not just the NHL like we've been doing up to this point. So what did you use to kind of come up with your list?
Yeah, I looked at a couple different factors. I mean, the biggest one was obviously I got to see a lot of these players in the NHL, right? And so that kind of weighed a little bit more heavy. I tried to look at some international play, but unfortunately, growing up and, even now I don't get to see a ton outside of, the World Championships and the Olympics and that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, I don't just get to watch a lot of, Czech Republic hockey. And, yes, but, after that, I just took an account to basically, the impact that each of these players had on, their respective teams when they were in the NHL, or, maybe when they played internationally, what they meant to the team, what they meant to their country, and, how they compared to, everybody else on this list.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I used NHL statistics and then considered, all right, was this guy on a, if they were on that 1998 gold medal team, of course, I gave them maybe a little bit of a bump.
Yes.
And it played a factor whether they did play for Czech Republic. I think that because they haven't had a ton of success since that point, I leaned a little heavier to their NHL stats, whereas maybe some other teams, some other countries, I may lean a little heavier into their international play. Okay, so with that said, let's go to, as we always do, a few players that just missed your list. Who just missed your list, Justin?
Yeah, I've got one guy who was actually on that 98 team. That's Vinny Prospal, played center. I also have Robert Lang, a guy that I don't have fond memories of as a Detroit Red Wing, so maybe that hurt his stock a little bit in my book. And then recently retired, I would say, not like, this season, but Thomas Plekanec.
Okay. Yeah, I did not have Plekanec on there. I had Vinny Prospal was on my just miss. And then Peter Nedved and Peter Sikora wind up on my just miss. Peter Nedved, probably the most significant player on my just miss, as he was a top 5 draft pick and had a good career. But I think that when all is said and done, the players ahead on this list had a bigger impact on their team. So,
okay,
let's go to number 10.
Yeah, number 10 for me, Peter Sikora, a guy making your just miss.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you look at in terms of NHL statistics, he is 6th all time in terms of Czech Republic players in terms of scoring, with 721 points and just a little over 1,000 games. And To be quite honest, I didn't really get to watch too much of him growing up. He was, and even, lately into the 2000s here, but I don't know why. He kind of escaped my radar when just watching teams, because maybe it's just my hatred for the New Jersey Devils early on, in the 90s especially. But man, this guy, not only could he put up the points, but he was actually really well known as being a good two-way player. I mean, he got, in the top 20 Selke voting once, and, got consideration for the Lady Byng as well. So he was a gentlemanly player who played on both sides of the puck pretty well.
So gentlemanly.
And I mean, let's face it, he gets a couple Stanley Cups in there too. Not too shabby.
Did he? Who did he win the cup with?
The Devils and the Penguins.
Oh, he won the cup with the Devils in '95, eh?
No, 2000, and then
was he there?
One with the Penguins, yeah, in 2009.
Really?
Which again,
man, I totally forgot about those. I'm thinking like Peter Nedved on the New York Rangers and.
Yeah, well, I mean, when he was with the Penguins, in 2009, he was more of a secondary guy. I mean, when you have the likes of your
Crosby and Malkin are
he kind of falls behind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, at my number 10, I had a guy who he also won the Stanley Cup with the New Jersey Devils twice, as a matter of fact, and that is the center, the beast of a man, Bobby Holik.
Okay, yeah, a little higher on my list. So
okay, Bobby Holik, third most NHL games played by a Czech Republic player. He 1,314 games. He scored over 300 goals, 747 points, and amassed over 1,400 penalty minutes. So not too bad there, and was a power play goal machine as well. 74 of his 326 coming on the power play. But I think more than anything, he's just a monster. He was able to just move guys around. He created his own space. He didn't need any help creating any space. So he definitely deserves to be on this list. He was an absolute monster. I think he's a little bit lower on my list, maybe in comparison to some other guys, not necessarily putting up better overall stats, but I think Holik was oftentimes he was a third line center who put up some pretty decent numbers, but for the most part, a third line center. He did have some 60-point seasons for New Jersey in the late 90s. Never scored more than, 27 goals was the most goals he ever scored. But for the most part, especially when New Jersey was winning their cups, he was a little bit younger when he's there, when New Jersey's winning the cups. He's, 20 points the year they won the Stanley Cup in 95 in the regular season. And the other years he's winning the cup, really, he is a really good third line, second line kind of guy. So he never really was the man for the New Jersey Devils. And so that was one reason why I said, I'm gonna knock you down the list just a little bit.
Okay.
Let's go to your number 9.
Number 9 for me, Peter Nedved, another center. This guy, he actually, excuse me, he was, just a... he moved around a lot. Let's just put it that way. He started his career Vancouver, then to St. Louis, then the Rangers and Pittsburgh's, all within, a matter of 5-6 years.
Hence why I forgot which teams he played for.
Right. Yeah, kind of gets, forgotten about a lot. But, you look at his production. In 982 games, 717 points in the NHL. Can't really knock those numbers. And then, of course, that those numbers fall in for, 7th all-time, tied with the guy, another guy maybe might have made your list, of Martin Straka. But, unfortunately, no Stanley Cups, not a lot of, no hardware to go with it. And, not a lot of playoff success either. But, the numbers don't lie. This guy did produce early on in his career. I think his best season, 99 points, almost hitting that 100-point plateau in Pittsburgh. Of course, it probably didn't help or hurt who he was playing with. at that time, but still was able to produce no matter where he went, especially when the Rangers had this what I like to call the importing of Czech players quite a bit early in the 2000s. So
yeah, and I think the one thing that maybe held me off on Peter Nedved too was that he was not on that 98 Nagano team.
Yeah. I did consider that too, but when I look at his career, I especially when they start keeping track of time on ice, he was always a top line guy, and he especially with those Rangers teams early on, he produced like it, but they were never really known for their scoring early in the 2000s, and he still managed to put up some pretty good numbers for me. So
I mean, it is like when you know what, I think there was a year that he missed. And that would be why. I'm looking at Peter Nedved's yearly statistics, and it goes from 96-97 to 98-99. So obviously he had some kind of injury. I'm sure we could dig that up, but that would probably be the reason that he wasn't in the Olympics there. So
could be.
Okay, my number 9 is a guy you just mentioned, was Martin Straka, coming in at number 9. And again, another guy who didn't really have the hardware. But for my money, I feel like I got to watch quite a bit of Martin Straka, and because the Penguins were kind of my second team. Mario Lemieux was always my favorite player, and so I just ended up, any opportunity I got to watch them, I put up some great seasons, and at one point was really he was the top center in Pittsburgh. Granted, they weren't great, but his offensive numbers, where I had Bobby Holik just one spot lower, Martin Straka definitely is 30 points behind, but also almost 400 games behind. So definitely having a little bit more of an impact on the score sheet on a regular basis. He's 10th all time in points per game, and is 8th all time in scoring at 717. Actually tied with Peter Nedved. So I think you mentioned that, but
yeah.
Okay, let's go to your number 8.
Number 8 for me, Jakub Voracek, current NHL player on the Philadelphia Flyers. Got to say, I mean, this guy, already close to 700 points in his career. And doesn't hurt. He gets to play a lot of time with Claude Giroux, but I love this guy's game. And surprisingly, I always considered him a goal scorer for some reason. But when you look at the numbers, he never really had more than 22, 23 goals in a season. And he's a good setup man. I mean, I'll be honest. I love watching his game. He plays a good two-way game, but I watch him float up and down the lineup in terms of first and second line play. And he always produces, and he's always been rock solid, reliable. He might not put up the 90-point seasons, but he'll get you 60 points every year. He's reliable, and just he does what he does, and he's pretty good at it. So
yeah, 7th overall pick of the Columbus Blue Jackets, so definitely highly favored coming into the draft. He also was a first All-Star in 2014-15 when he put up 81 points in 82 games. Had a real nice season that year. I'd say it's interesting with him that he goes to he's on the Blue Jackets and really has, 3 seasons of this guy's going to be a pretty decent, probably second line type of player. Was definitely a setup man. He did get 50 points his second year, 46 the next, and goes to Philadelphia and continues to put up those types of numbers. 49 points his next year, but then it was that lockout year. He goes and puts up 46 and 48, and since then he's always been relied upon to get at least other than 1 year, he's had over 60 points every single year since that point. For about 7-8 years straight. So he has definitely been a model of consistency. I actually don't have him on my list. I strongly considered him, and I kind of went and said, I'm going to wait until until he finishes his career, see where he finishes up, see what he's able to do with the remainder of his career, what he does with it. I felt like the guys that I have now ahead of him, for some reason, maybe I was feeling a little more nostalgic. I do have one active NHL player left on my list, but all the other guys, I think I got nostalgic. I just said, Jakub Voracek, you'll be on this list eventually, but I'm not going to let you on it yet.
Okay, yeah. I think by the time it's all said and done, I think, he's going to finish his career top 3 in scoring. And then there's another active NHL player on my list who I think will probably surpass him, but we'll get to that a little later.
Okay. Well, my number 8 is the first defenseman to appear on my list. He is the 22nd all-time Czech Republic scorer, but the second all-time defensive scorer. He did play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I watched him play I watched his entire career, and always was putting up solid. Like, he was always relied upon for a 40 to 50 point season. Even put up a 58 and a 53 point season, a 67 point season in 05-06, and that is Thomas Kaberle.
Ooh, okay. Good pick. Did not make my list, but I did think of him, and I kind of actually thought sneakingly, I was like, I bet you Mark kind of sneaks him on here somehow.
Yeah, I felt like, and he also won the cup with the Bruins in 2011. And I traded at the deadline over there. He was actually, you maybe wouldn't think of him as somebody who is a top 15 player in the NHL in terms of defensemen, but 02-03 he's 11th on Norris Trophy voting. 05-06 he's 13th. The following year 16th. Following year 17th. So he was in the conversation. Albeit he wasn't going to win the Norris. Especially with the other guys that were in there, but he was in the conversation of, hey, this guy's a number 1 defenseman, and he's one of the best ones in the league. As in terms of puck moving defenseman, he maybe is the most underrated puck moving defenseman of the early 2000s.
Yeah, I won't disagree with you there at all.
He had 58 points in 05-06, and his team missed the playoffs. So he's definitely doing something right there. Okay, let's go to your number 7.
Number 7, the first goaltender to crack our list, Thomas Vokoun.
Tommy Vokoun. He is my number 7 as well.
Okay, yeah, I got to say, probably one of the more underrated goaltenders of his time. Began his career, obviously, with Montreal, but was soon taken by the startup Nashville Predators. And I'll just say, Nashville was not the Nashville they are today. Early on, they struggled to score. They struggled to win a lot of games. And it's funny. I look at 2002-03. You look at his numbers, right? 25 wins, 31 losses, and so you say, okay, not very good. But he still managed to get in the top 10 for Vezina voting because of just what he meant to that franchise early on. He was really like the first star for this franchise, I think, and
put up good number. 918 save percentage and a 2.21 goals against for a team that was not good.
Goals.
For a team that was not good.
Yeah, I know. And so you look at again as you move down the list in his career. Then he goes to Florida to again another team that was not very good. 09-10. He finished again with another losing record, 23 and 28 and 11, but still managed to get some Hart voting. That's just what this guy meant. That's how good he was when he played, but just again was never on the winning side. Never had a team that could really propel him in the playoffs, and it shows because he only went to the playoffs 3 times, and 2 of those times with Nashville they were out in the first round. Even though the first year he went and put up a .939 save percentage. Yeah,
that was going up against I guess they were the defending Stanley Cup champ? No, they won the cup 2 years ago. I think in 02-03, is that the year that the Wings lost to Anaheim in the first round?
Yes, it was. We don't like to talk about that here.
I understand. I don't want to talk about Game 7s either.
Yes.
Okay. I also had Thomas Vokoun there as well, and yeah, definitely deserving of that. And I believe he was on the 2006 Torino team that won the bronze.
That is correct.
So he does take home a little bit of hardware as well in the he doesn't win anything in the NHL, but at least he goes and he gets an Olympic medal.
There you go.
The Czech Republic's only other Olympic medal. Although they did win gold also in 2005 and 2010 in the World Championships. And actually had a 3-year run, 99, 2000, and 2001, where they won the World Championship 3 years in a row. So the team was fantastic because you've got Dominik Hasek in net and Jaromir Jagr. But anyways, we'll get to some of those guys. Let's move along to your number 7.
My number 6.
Your number 6.
Yeah, guy, you already mentioned on your list a little earlier. Bobby Holik for me, just a beast. Again, you talked about it, an immovable object. I think of him as almost like the poor man's Chara at the forward position. But spent early on a lot of his career with the New Jersey Devils and became known as just a bruiser, a basher. 3 straight seasons of over 100 penalty minutes, and then gets signed and goes to the Rangers. And from everything I read, and again, I was never, a big follower of that rivalry of the Rangers Devils back then. But boy, everybody in the New York area hated him.
Oh yeah.
When he was on the Rangers. And so, even it's funny to me when you look at the 03-04 season, finishing with 56 points, he actually led the Rangers in scoring that year, which is just crazy to me. So Bobby Holik at least can say he led a team in scoring one season. Yes, and
Rangers fans still hated him because he was getting paid too much.
Exactly, yeah. They signed him to a ridiculous $45 million 5-year contract. And then, of course, the lockout season in 04-05, and then gets bought out, re-signs with the Atlanta Thrashers. So
the Trashers.
Yeah. Yeah, luckily he gets to finish his career as a Devil, but yeah, this guy was just a beast in front of the net, just a beast on the power play. Just a model of consistency in terms of production. Every year he was a 40, 50 point guy. You always could count on him for that. And never a top line guy, but he was a great second, third line center to have on a team.
Okay, my number 6 is my only active NHL player, guy taken by the Boston Bruins, 25th overall in 2014. And that is David Pastrnak.
All right.
This guy has already shown that he's probably going in when all is said and done. My guess is that he is in the top, maybe even the top 3 for Czech Republic players all time, especially if he continues to put up the goals that he puts up. He would have likely had 50 goals this year, which would put him in very unique company in terms of players from the Czech Republic that have scored 50 goals. There is only 2 of them right now, and he would be the third. Doesn't look like he's going to get the opportunity to do that this year, so next year he'll have to go and score 50 goals again, maybe. But the guy has had such a great start to his career. 70 points in 16-17 as a 20-year-old, really to kind of break into the league and show off who he is, scoring 34 goals, and up to this season where he's put up 95. He hasn't scored less. He scored more than 34 goals every year for 4 years in a row. That's fantastic. He's definitely one of the most consistent goal scorers in the NHL, and at some point here, he's going to win some kind of trophy, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But he's only he's played 6 years in the NHL. So for that, I'm not willing to put him into the top 5 yet, because all the guys in the top 10 have, they're all playing more than 1,000 games in the NHL, and I just didn't feel like David Pastrnak, who's played less than 400. Granted, he is almost a point per game, but I felt like keeping him just outside the top 10 was appropriate.
Okay. Yeah. Can't argue with that. He is on my list, but maybe a little higher than yours. So.
Okay. Well, let's find out how high he went. Let's go your number 5.
Number 5, former Colorado Avalanche, Milan Hajduk.
Okay, I have him at number 5 as well.
Okay, yeah, a guy who actually did get to play with the famous 98 Czech Republic's hockey team, although he did not produce any points during their 6-game tear. But,
yeah, because they won their games 1-0 and 2-1.
I know, just fantastic. But, I mean, let's face it, third all-time in terms of points for a Czech Republic player, just a little shy over 1,000 games played, all in the same uniform, which is very rare, and you got to tip the cap to that man for that. But has his best season in 02-03 with 50 goals and 98 points. So again, you talk about Czech players with 50 goals. Yep. He is one of them.
And he wins the Maurice Rocket Richard trophy for his efforts as well.
Yes, he does. But oddly enough, finishes 12th in Hart voting that season. So
yeah, I think the general consensus was that playing with Peter Forsberg was what really helped him. So.
And that's why Forsberg got the Hart trophy.
Exactly. They said, "Oh, Forsberg got 50 goals for another guy." It wasn't quite your, Joe Thornton.
David Chichu.
Yeah, Joe Thornton getting Jonathan Chichu.
Yeah.
But yeah, Hajduk, phenomenal player. I think always kind of seen as a guy who needed another great player around him. I mean, it's not his fault that he constantly had Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg around him. Not to mention the bevy of other talents that came through Colorado during. I mean, he played for Colorado all 14 years in the NHL, and I think he just took advantage of it. And over 1,000 games, puts up 805 points, and was really one of the top scoring wingers in the NHL while he was in the league, especially on that right side. Okay, well, we're in the top 5. Let's go number 4. This is very interesting to me because I think there's somebody in my top 4 that you don't have on your list at all.
I think so. Yeah. So I'm curious to see who it is. Yeah. Especially this high on the list. My goodness. It's just probably someone that, I just completely blanked on. But okay, number 4 for me is a guy, you already mentioned him, the Pasta, David Pastrnak.
Okay.
I love this kid's game, and just watching him play. You talk about, your Patrick Kanes, your Ovies of the world, line drivers on the wing, and there's not too many of them. And I think David Pastrnak is one of those guys. And you look at the players around him, right? It doesn't hurt that he gets to play with Matisse Bergeron and. But those guys weren't huge point producers until, David Pastrnak came along and started playing alongside him. And boy, did their production explode because of this kid. And he drives that team right now, I think, honestly. He is the reason they have such a dangerous first line. And, it shows he's a model of consistency in terms of scoring goals. I mean, just 3 straight 34-plus goals seasons. And I do think when it's all said and done, he will be a top 3 scorer in terms of, Czech Republic players in the NHL, and he'll probably have some hardware. Unfortunately, now in the NHL, we're in that time where they usually look to centers first and then to the wings in terms of hardware. But I think hopefully he'll get a Stanley Cup ring, and maybe the NHL will let the players play in the Olympics again too. So he might get some more love there, another medal or something. But yeah, for me, number 4, the Pasta.
Okay. My number 4 is probably the guy who did not make your list, shockingly enough. Apparently no love for defensemen on your list for Czech Republic players, because for my money, I don't think you have a single one on your list. So my number 4 is the all-time Czech Republic defensive scorer, a guy who has the second most games all time by any Czech-born player, second only to a guy who appears higher on my list, and that is Roman Hamrlik. Played almost 1,400 games, put up 638 points, all while amassing over 1,400 penalty minutes. And he was like the top pairing on the Czech Republic team that won that Stanley Cup in the gold medal in '98.
Yes.
And he was always a model of consistency. I mean, he played in the NHL for 20 years, and other than the last year, I mean, he was always pretty healthy throughout all his years. Of course, you play long enough and you're going to end up with some seasons where you have some kind of injury. He played 20 years, but was always very healthy and made the playoffs. Out of his 20 years, was in the playoffs for 15 of them. And for a defenseman to put up 41 points in 113 playoff games just showed that he always showed up in the playoffs. He went on a couple runs. In '98, he he played 12 games for the Oilers in the playoffs. Probably his best stretch was later in his career, particularly the 09-10 Montreal Canadiens that came back down 3-1 to the Washington Capitals, and they go on to the conference finals. He put up 9 points in 19 games, but always a guy who was being played a ton, a lot of times over 25 minutes a night in the playoffs, and is just an absolute model of, like, he was your defensive defenseman who could also put up some points. He, his best goal scoring year, he had 16 goals a couple years, 65 points in 95, 96, but consistently put up somewhere between 35 and 40 points a year through the first 15 years or so in his career, and then he kind of fell into the 20 to 30 points. But you become a little, obviously the game changes a ton from his rookie season. He comes in 1992 to his final year in 2012-13. The game has changed quite a bit. So he's a big guy too, 6'2", 200 pounds. So I mean, he's probably slowing down as his career goes on. But also little known is that he was the first overall pick in the '92 draft. By the Tampa Bay Lightning. So
yeah,
a guy, I think he doesn't have a ton of rewards. He played a ton of games. He was one of the top defensemen on the gold medal team, and consistently played for the Czech Republic in the Olympics, the Olympics and the World Championships. He was generally, I mean, he was playing for them until a little bit later in his career when he kind of stopped playing internationally, which happens when guys get a little bit older. But he was a solid piece on that team. And he wasn't exactly a guy who was going to win the Norris Trophy any year other than his 95-96. He was 7th in Norris Trophy voting, but he was just always consistent. And when you're looking at a country that hasn't exactly produced a ton of superstars, and especially has hardly any defensemen worth talking about, I think that maybe pushes him a little higher, is that he was the top defenseman to play for the Czech Republic, I believe.
Yeah, I will put an asterisk on this one because I had my top 5. I knew which guys I wanted to put in there. And then when it came to 6 through 10, I had maybe about 10 different tabs open, and I think maybe I just might have closed it out prematurely, forgot about him, because he probably should have fallen in there maybe 7-ish, 6 for me. So I mean, we'll just throw an asterisk.
But at the same time, it's not like it's the word, like Peter Nedved is still a fantastic player. I mean, he still put up big points. But yeah, I do think Roman Hamrlik should at least be on this list, but that's okay.
We're going to throw an asterisk.
Okay, asterisk on Justin's list. It's not the first time that one of us have had an asterisk list. It's just the first time that you have. So usually it's me who forgets somebody. Let's go into the top 3, which I think we're going to have the same 3 players. Let's see what order we put them in.
Yeah, I think maybe number 3, you and I are going to have the same guy, and that's Patrick Elias.
Yep, got him at number 3.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say? We talked about Hayduk finishing his whole career with New Jersey or with Colorado, and this guy on another team that I hated growing up, mostly because what they did to Detroit in '95. But the New Jersey Devils, just a model of consistency again for 20 straight seasons. I mean, this guy was a producer, or I mean, you talk about it late in the 90s, early 2000s. He was a scorer, man, and he put up 40, 38. He could throw some goals in there, 96, 81 points. He had some good seasons, and then even into the latter half of his career, still producing, at 35 with 78 points. And, this guy played it on both ends of the ice very well. Got some nice Selke love there a couple of years, and got a nice little heart nod too. And in 2001. So finishing sixth in voting there. So for me at number 3, he obviously, he could be a guy that slips out of the top 3, but right now sitting number 2 in terms of NHL point producers from the Czech Republic.
Yeah, and he was really always known as the one guy on the New Jersey Devils that could score.
Yeah, exactly.
He wins those 2 cups in 2000 and 2003, and I mean and goes to the Stanley Cup and loses in 7 games in 2001 to the Colorado Avalanche. And in those 3 years, if you add up his goal total or his point totals in those 3 years, in 72 games, he put up 56 points. So definitely a guy who was on fire in the playoffs during that time, especially considering the fact that his team did not score that many goals in the
right.
in the playoffs either. So, but pretty crazy. 3 out of 4 years you play an average of 24 games in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's gotta wear you down a little bit for sure.
And then, of course, he went to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2012 when the Devils lose to the LA Kings, when they kind of got a taste of their own medicine and nobody could score on Jonathan Quick. So.
Yeah, and I think later on too, at that point in his career, you kind of watch his game evolve from a big point producer to being more of a defensive type of guy. I mean, you look at the years before. Only a few hits here or there, but then explodes in 11-12 with 36 hits during that playoff run. And, you could tell his game was kind of changing a little bit to adapt to the NHL as it was.
Yeah. And, you can't say anything bad about Patrick Elias. He just kind of went about his business, did his thing. Over 1,000 points in the National Hockey League, over 400 goals. Definitely deserving to be in the top 3. And let's go to number 2. Who do you have at number 2? There's 2 players left. Let's find out what order you have them in.
Yeah, we know who they are. For me, though, Jaromir Jagr is going to come in at number 2.
Wow, Jaromir Jagr. Okay.
Yeah.
I have them flipped. I have Jagr 1, Hasek 2.
And that's totally understandable. I mean, like 90% of the list that I looked at had Jagr at number 1, Hasek at number 2, and for one thing, I look at the amount of years that Jagr played, right? And I think, okay, this guy played 24 years in the NHL versus Hasek 16.
That's unbelievable. 24 years in the NHL. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but when I look at what Hasek was able to do in such a short period versus Jagr's, I think, okay, what if Hasek had come over to the NHL sooner? What if he wasn't playing behind Ed Belfour for all those, those few years there in Chicago? Would he have made more of an impact? Would he be, would have been more dominant and then get the love that maybe, Jagr's getting right now as being the all-time greatest Czech player? And so, I do think the answer to me would have been yes, because you look at his numbers early on in his career and, especially in the 90s, early 90s, I think, he would have changed the game, I think, just the way he played the game. And I don't think the NHL was ready for it at the time because goaltenders weren't, back then in the early 90s, late 80s, their save percentages were all below 900. Their goals against were all, 3.2. And it would have been interesting to see him play. But when Hasek came into the league, I mean, he destroyed everybody. He was just on a terrible, mediocre Buffalo team most of the time and managed to steal Hart trophies, Vezinas. I mean, he was so dominant for so long.
Literally took them to the Stanley Cup Finals in 99.
And in 98, we know the Czech Republic, no shot had it not been for Dominik Hasek. He was just so dominant in international play as well.
He won in 1999, 2000. He only played 35 games. He only won 15 of them. He was still 8th in Vezina Trophy voting and 17th in Hart. And he only won 15 games.
That's how good he was.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah. I'll say this though. Of course, there's no true way to know. We don't have a time machine. We can't change the past. All we know is that really he came over in the early 90s, was on the Blackhawks, get traded to the Sabres, and then kind of takes off from there. He does play until he's 43 years old, which is rare for a goaltender. And I mean, his best years were between the ages of 29 and the last year he wins the Vezina is when he's 36 for the Sabres. Comes over and finally wins his cup with Detroit as a 37-year-old. And then, I guess even as a 42-year-old, no 607, he's 38-11 and was 5th in Vezina Trophy voting. So, I mean, to age 42, there's his window. And then I guess I don't really know I don't remember why he left. Why was it like a kind of a nagging injuries that he retired?
Yeah, he had a lot of hamstring problems. Yeah. I mean, when you're a human slinky, it's no surprise at all.
Right. And I mean, so, but he had those issues in his 40s, whereas most goaltenders have those issues into their late 30s. So 37, 38, something like that. So I do think that maybe not playing the rigorous schedule of the NHL early on in his career allowed for him to play more games later on. That's always a thought. Like guys like Tim Thomas who comes in later and a Craig Anderson who kind of came in later in his career, is that did it allow for his body to have more longevity later on? Because I mean it's hard to play. He played over 700 games as a goaltender in the National Hockey League, which is basically like playing 1,400 games as a skater. You can probably double it up. And I don't know if he had come in the league in the 80s, if he would be as good as he was into the 90s. Like I don't know. There's no way of knowing.
Yeah, I can't argue with you there. And I mean, you look at I think it's Brodeur who had 5 straight 70-plus games in a season that he played. And you look at Hasek, he only had one time in his career where he played more than 70 games. And so, maybe that, game management by Buffalo early on in his career was part of the reason why he was able to play for so long. I mean, again, most goaltenders are lucky if they play till they're 35. I mean, right. It's hard on your body. And that game management early on and, in his late 20s, early 30s is, probably why he was able to play for so long. And you want to talk about a guy that played for a long time. I mean, Jaromir Jagr, my gosh, 45 still playing in Calgary. Just unreal. I mean, he actually, at 44 years old with the Florida Panthers, managed to still pull out an 82-game season.
Yeah. Yeah, he played for so long that on hockeyreference.com, they actually have his from 1990 to 2004, they have those stats, and then they cut it off and they continue it. They like redo all the top stuff because it's just too long.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, just a phenomenal career. I mean, for my money, for a guy to play 1,733 games and he had 1,921 points. I mean, he's the second all-time scorer.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. All-time. Second all-time scorer. And, of course, Hasek had, I'd say, I mean, it's funny because both these guys were the year that Hasek won his Hart, right? He wins the Hart in, what is it? It's in 96, 97, and 97, 98. 98, 99, Jagr wins the Hart.
Yeah, and Hasek's not far behind him, third in voting.
No. And I mean, but the years that, so Jagr wins the Pearson in 98, 99, in 99, 2000, even though he's not winning the Hart, he's winning the Pearson. He won it a couple times. So that's just, I think it goes to show that the players in the league as well, definitely appreciated who he was. I just think the longevity, and I mean Jágr at the same time. We talk about what would have happened if Hasek had those couple years in the beginning. Would he have been able to make an even greater impact? And I think the same can be said for Jágr, because he leaves the National Hockey League. He's 35 years old, and he leaves for 3.5 seasons. For four seasons. Something like that.
3 seasons. Yeah.
And what could he have done? I mean, he was putting up. He put up 71 points the year before he left. He put up 54, 67, 66 when he came back. So who's to say that those 3 years he doesn't end up with? Let's go on the very conservative side and say that he gets 20 goals and 30 assists in all those years. I mean, this guy, he would have basically 2,100 points and over 800 goals. If he had played those games, there is a chance he probably still wouldn't have beaten Gretzky's record, but he definitely would have had more than 800 goals. And would be probably the second all-time goal scorer as well as the points if he had been in the league for those times. But again, I mean, I heard a lot of stories about Jágr, and that when he left and he went overseas, that he kind of found himself again, and that he was kind of living an empty life, and he went over there and he was alone, and he I guess from what I've heard from people, he found God over there, and that kind of changed his outlook on life, and that's why he wanted to come back to the NHL when all was said and done. And so, I mean, you just don't know. Like, if he had stayed, maybe he retires a lot sooner and doesn't go to New Jersey. He doesn't go to Florida and has the impact that he had. I think Jágr, beyond what he did in the 90s where he tore up the NHL, I mean, 3 out of 4 seasons in a row where he has over 100 points. And I mean, he went 149, 95, 102, 127, 96, and 121. And in the year that he had basically 150 points, he was only 4th in Hart Trophy voting. Like, man, what kind of year do you need to put up? Mario Lemieux was first that year with 161 points, which is fair. He did have 69 goals. And you had Messier, who had 99 points. He's second. And then Lindros is third with 115 points. Jágr scored 62 goals that year, 87 assists, and yet was 4th in voting because he played with Mario Lemieux. And that's exactly why.
Yeah.
And I consider the top 3 guys: Lemieux, Canadian; Messier, Canadian; Lindros, Canadian, and there's Jágr. It's the Czech Republic guy, and Fedorov just below him with 107 points, who is Russian. I think they maybe had a little bit of a Canadian bias at the time. So,
yeah, I mean, let's face it. It took what's his face, Patrick Kane, so long to be the first American to ever win the Hart there. But yeah, I will say, I mean, you can't argue with whoever you put 1 or 2 here in this spot. I mean, obviously most lists will have Jágr up there. Obviously the numbers don't lie, second all time in the NHL in scoring. And I mean, gosh, man, you look at his playoff numbers too. I wish he had played with, a few more dominant teams, because obviously he gets a couple Stanley Cups, early on with Pittsburgh. But, after that, it kind of went dry. But I would have loved to have seen, a few more deep playoff runs to see if he could really had willed some of these teams, into a cup or two, especially after, those years where Mario maybe wasn't in Pittsburgh. So that would have been exciting to see for sure.
Yeah, he did. He went to the finals in 2013 when the Bruins lose to the Blackhawks, but he was kind of definitely more of a role player at that point. But yeah, one other thing about Jágr and the Czech Republic, he is the all-time Czech Republic leading scorer by far. I mean, he has 10 goals. The next guy has 7. That's Martin Rushinsky. He has 15 assists. The only guy with more assists than him is Martin Havlat. Actually has 29 assists.
Wow.
Not in the Olympics, in like, different
International play.
Yeah, international. Is that correct?
I think so. I mean,
I'm looking at this and it just seems weird because Martin Havlat had 1 goal and 29 assists. No. It's wrong. It's definitely wrong. It's saying that he has 27 assists in 2002 in the Olympics. That's wrong. I was like, that can't be right.
No way. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going Yager with 15 assists. The next guy has 9, and that's actually Thomas Kaberle and Robert Lang, another Pittsburgh guy from the Czech Republic who missed both our lists. But yeah, that was fun. Let's we'll do another top 10 country the next time we meet. Do you have a preference on which country you want to do next?
No, none whatsoever, actually.
Let's stick with a little bit smaller of a country. Let's go Norwegian. You pick Sweden or Finland, whichever one you want to do.
Let's do the Finns. They're kind of emerging right now
in
terms of the international scene, so they're exciting for me.
All right. Well, on our next show, we will hit up the top 10 all-time players from Finland. And until then, you can hit us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. And as the NHL maybe nears a solution here for what they're going to do or the playoffs, it sounds like it's going to be a 24-game, a 24-team playoff. And once we know what that is, all bets are off. We'll be doing a show on the possible playoff battles and playoff matchups. But we've been holding off on doing that just until we find out exactly what's going on, because we don't want to waste an entire show on something that is entirely theoretical. But once we know that, we'll start jumping into current hockey things. But until then, enjoy these lists, and we will talk to you guys soon.